Likkutei Sichos, Chelik Chav Daled, Volume 24, the third Sicha for Parsha Shoftim. This Sicha will explain the pasuk Ki ha'adam eitz hasada. Pasuk says that man is like the tree in the field. It will elaborate on the quality of the person, the yid, that would compare it specifically to eitz hasada, to the trees, and a great lesson that we can derive for it in a practical sense. Just to familiarize ourselves with the psukim that pertain to this, the verses, so it's in chapter 20, verse 19 and 20, Perek Chaf, psukim Yutes and Chaf. It says over there that if you're going to lay siege on a city, you should not destroy its trees that can produce fruit, because the Torah says, because from it you shall eat, and therefore you shouldn't cut it down. And the pasuk concludes by saying, Ki ha'adam eitz hasada, for man is like the tree in the field, which just has many meaning, as we'll see in the Sicha. Just the Rabbi will focus in and what seems to be the literal understanding of these words. Then the next verse says, however, rak eitz ashetedas, tree that you know that does not produce any fruits, that tree you can destroy and you can cut it down. To familiarize ourselves with just several concepts which I think are well known. First of all, we know that the world is divided into 4 sugim and 4 kinds, or 4 elements, 4 levels, that is. Doimim, tzemeach, chayim, medaber, the inanimate, tzemeach, plant life, anything that grows, chay, that's the animal life, that anything that crawls, lives, moves, and of course medaber, which is the human being. Of course, we understand that the min hamedaber, the human being, is disproportionately greater than any of the other kinds in the world. Another thing to be familiar with, according to halacha, when something is less than 3 tfachim off the ground, something that is so connected to the ground that it's less than 3 tfachim, it's considered to be part of the ground. A practical example for this is on Shabbos, you're not allowed to make any whatsoever use of a tree. However, on the part of the tree, or on a tree stump, that's less than 3 tfachim protruding from the ground, which is about 7-8 inches, 6 to 8 inches or so, depending on the opinion, then you're allowed to make use of it. Finally, another concept to be familiar with, in Bnei Yisrael, amongst Yidden, there are generally two types of Jews. There is what we call the Yoshvei Oil, literally meaning those who sit in the tents, of Torah, those who most of their life, if not all, is dedicated to the study of Torah, but that's only a minority of Bnei Yisrael. And then, of course, there is the average person, which is the person that goes out there into the world. True, they have to learn Torah, but their main endeavor in life is to go out there, be in the world, work in the world, and only in certain occasions, either in the day or in the week, do they have the privilege of studying Torah and being exclusively dedicated to Torah and davening and so on. Let's go into the Sicha. So on the pasuk, the words in the pasuk, Ki ha'adam eitz hasada, literal translation, for man is the tree in the field. The Gemara asks, really? Is the man really a tree in the field? I mean, how is this? What does this mean? And the Gemara answers that because there are seemingly two contradictory verses, that one verse says, from it you shall eat, and you shouldn't cut it down. The next verse says, no, you should destroy it, and you should cut it down. How is this possible? How can they both be true? Says the Gemara, this is what it's saying. If im Talmud Chacham Hagenhu, if this Talmud Chacham, this scholar, is Hagun, is proper, meaning he has good qualities, then, quote, Mimenu Toichel, this is the verse that's saying, from it you shall eat, and you should not cut it down. And Rashi says, what do it mean from it you should eat? That you should learn from him, and you should be connected to him. However, if not, if this Talmud Chacham, although perhaps he can be very, very scholastically great, but when it comes to this character traits, he is not Hagum, he is not a proper person, then Tashchish is to destroy it, and Rashi says means you should distance yourself from him and cut yourself off. Now, the Rebbe says from the question of the Gemara, when the Gemara says, V'chi adam eitz hasadahu, the Gemara asks this, and it's obvious from the question of the Gemara that the Gemara understands this verse literally, not as a mashal, not as a metaphor or parable, but rather as a literal statement that man is the tree in the field. So, in other words, that the tree brings out the true aspect of Adam, of what a person is. Another practical proof for this, that we take this in the literal sense, I mean, it's not only from the question of the Gemara could be understood, but also in actual practice. We know that in tradition, we observe Tu B'Shvat, which is Rosh Hashanah for trees, not Rosh Hashanah for man. Now, it's interesting to note that when you look in the Maseches Rosh Hashanah, there are various Rosh Hashanahs, there are various quote-unquote New Years throughout the year for different things, but we don't celebrate all of them. The only ones we celebrate is our Rosh Hashanah, which is Rosh Hashanah for the whole world and for mankind, and specifically for mankind, when mankind was created. And then we celebrate, at least we attribute some importance to it, we eat new fruits, we don't say Tachnun, the Rosh Hashanah for the tree. So that tells us that this is literal. So the Rebbe says, however, we need to understand. If this means literal, that man is like the tree in the field, how does this answer about the Talmud Chacham, whether he is a proper person or not, whether he has proper character traits or not, how does that explain this? How does this answer how it's possible that man should be literally like a tree in the field? When it seems to be only one aspect of the thing. In other words, the idea of having proper midos, proper character traits, seems to be only one detail, one aspect of the person. How does this explain why the person in general, overall, is referred to, is compared to the tree in the field? That's one question. Second question is, how really is it possible to compare a person to a tree? In other words, to describe the person with this great aspect, with this quality that he grows, that he's like a tzemeach, that he's like the plant life which grows. It seems to be that there is a much greater, there are much greater aspects, much greater qualities in the person. For example, the fact that a person is also similar to a chai, to a living thing. A person moves, a person transgresses, a person does things, and he can accomplish things. So why are we limiting the person, so to speak, by comparing the Adam, the person, to Tzemeach specifically, and this becomes the verse, and this becomes also the Gemara's point that a person is like a Tzemeach. So the Rebbe says the answer to this is that there is a quality, a unique quality, there's a uniqueness in Soimeach, in the plant life, which doesn't even exist, not in Chai and not in Medaber. In other words, there's some special character trait, some special quality in Soimeach, which makes it, from this aspect at least, makes it greater even than Chai and Medaber. What is that? A tzemeach, anything that's a plant that grows from the ground, is always and constantly connected to its root, it's connected to its source of life. This and only this continues to give it life and continues to allow it to grow. In the moment that you sever this connection, the thing starts to die and it's dead. It's no longer alive. However, a chai, or medaber on the other hand, although, as the Gemara tells us, Hakoil hoya mina afar, everything originates in the earth, in the dust. As we know, God made the original bodies of man and the animals from the earth, but still, they are totally detached from it, from their source, that is, from where they come from. Moreover, how do they get their nutrition, their feed? Also, although it comes from the ground, but it needs to be first severed from the ground in order to be able to provide the nutrition to man and to animal. Whereas the nutrition of in other words, the constant life-giving of the plants is only and exclusively when it's connected to its source, when it's not severed. Because the moment it's severed, it no longer can draw chayis, it can no longer draw its nutrition, its life energy from the ground. Now, it's true that generally this idea is also in existence by the fish. We know that fish, the moment you take them out of the water, they die. In other words, it seems that they are very like this because they are constantly connected to their source. So then why are we comparing it to plant life? We just said that plant life has a quality that doesn't exist even by chai. But dagim, fish, are a kind of chai. They're part of the animal kingdom. Says the Rebbe, there's a distinction. And what is that? That there is an essential difference. You see, the plant life, even though it grows higher, it protrudes, it comes out of its source. Remember, plants, especially bushes, even more trees, they grow out of the source of its source of life, but yet they're connected. Whereas the fish has to be exclusively and all the time connected and within its source of life. The moment it comes out, it's dead. Halachically speaking, that's why it doesn't need shechita, it doesn't need to be slaughtered. Because the moment it comes out from the source of life, it's dead. Even if it sticks itself out too much and it doesn't have any water connected to it, it starts to die. Whereas the tree can stick out from the ground and it can protrude from it tens of meters, tens of feet, and yet it's still connected at its source, at its base to the ground, to its source of life. And that is the distinction. Now, the tree within the plant life, within vegetation life, the tree has even a greater expression of this milah. You see, all other plants, for example, typical produce like vegetables, grains, beans, they need to be replanted every single year. In other words, there's no continuity. Yes, while they're growing, they are connected to the ground. While they're growing, they have to be connected to the ground. Otherwise, they stop growing, as we said. However, a tree has a very, very unique quality. And that is that the tree, being that it's connected to the ground, it continues to give off fruit year after year after year. And it shows a great tolerance for all kinds of changes, all the seasons. It goes through all the seasons. And yet it doesn't stop it from living. Perhaps it doesn't produce fruits in every single season, but the tree continues to be a living thing and again produces fruits in its season. And this is a greater indication even on its special and unique connection to its root, to the ground. That it stays connected and it continues to give and give and give. Now we'll appreciate how this applies to the Adam, to the person. You see, the Gemara, the Medrash refers to a person, every individual, as, quote, oilam katan, as a small world, a small universe. And whatever happens in the big universe is reflected in the small universe. So likewise, within a person, there's also these four kinds. Doimem, tzomeach, chayim, medaber. What is tzomeach? What is this plant life in the person? And what is the equivalent of it? That is the midos, the character traits of a person. What is the connection? It's very inherent. Because midos, they grow, they evolve, and they continue to give off. They go from small to big, right? From a younger age to older age. As person matures, the midos develop and they become more mature. Now it's true, one can argue, well, also intellectually that happens too. You start off small and you go to big. But there is an inherent difference. You see, in the intellect, there isn't really this expression of tzomeach as much as there is in the midos, in the character traits. Why is that? You see, seichel, intellect, is actually more like or more compared, more similar to the aspect of chai, of the living animal kingdom. Why is that? You see, because chai is not restricted to one specific location. Chai is not stationary by definition. What is a chai? Something that moves around. If it doesn't move around, it's a tzomeach. It's a plant. A living thing can go from one place to another place. It can change terrain. It can change environment. That is the idea of seichel, of intellect. Think about it. Intellectually, the very same person, depending on the matter that's being studied, that's being understood, the very same person can reach in two matters two opposite conclusions intellectually. Because in this idea, in this matter, the person can understand, as a person can go, in other words, from one place to another, from one extreme to another. The person can understand in this matter why the conclusion has to be more leaning towards, let's say, chesed, a kind resolution, whereas in the other matter, intellectually, a person can be in a totally different place and understand how there the conclusion has to be more gvura, severity. So it's the same person, but he can, so to speak, be mobile, like a chai, like an animal. He can be going from one place to another. That's because of the intellect. However, when it comes to midos, when it comes to the character traits of a person, that is something that's more set in the person. A person's chesed always remains chesed. Gvura is always gvura. It's just that it grows, it evolves, it develops from small to big. In other words, it matures. And that's why the person, the olam katan, the person who's compared to a small universe, we say that the aspect of tzemeach is where the real, true expression of the person is there. Because that's something which has a connection to tzemeach. Now says the Rebbe, just like there is in the quote, big world, in the great universe, there is an advantage. There's a great quality in Sameach, as we discussed before, as we discussed above, that it's always connected to its root, to its source, and that makes it greater in this sense than even Chayim Medaber. Likewise, in the person, in the Olam Katan, in this small universe, the Sameach, aka the midos of the person, the character traits of the person have the mila that they're always connected to the root, which is the pnimius of the nefesh ha'adam. The inner soul of the person gets expressed through their character traits. And this is the reason why we see that when it comes to character traits, people have a much greater firmness and stubbornness when it comes to the character traits, to the expression of their midos. And it's that it becomes very, very difficult to change them, so to speak, to change their place, to change their location, to jump from one thing to another. For example, somebody who by nature is a person of chesed, very hard for them to change and to become a person of gevura. It's just almost impossible. It's not totally impossible, but it's very, very difficult. Why? Because a tzemeach doesn't move. Now, there is the extreme circumstance where a tzemeach does move. You could transplant a tree, but that's with great effort. That is not natural for a tree. That's not the norm, like an animal just walks away from its location. And now we'll appreciate and understand why the Pasuk says that a person is eitz hasa, that compares us to the tree. Because dafka, when it comes to the midos, do you express in a revealed manner the pnimius of the nefesh of the person, as we just explained. And perhaps we can say that this is the reason why we find that the main thrust, the main focus of the avodah of a person, of your average person, is focused on the refinement, the birur, the zichuch of their midos. Why? Because correcting, refining your midos, your character traits, this matters. This is negeya to the essence of your soul, to the etzem of a nefesh, because we just said it connects and it expresses the pnimius of your nefesh. And with this, you come to the shleimus, to the complete state, to a totality of what a Adam has to be, the complete state of the being of a Adam. And this is the explanation. Now we can understand what the Gemara says about the Talmud Chacham. That when you come to learn from a Talmud Chacham, it's not enough to have somebody that has the intellectual qualities and is able to convey and explain things intellectually. But rather what's crucial, that he has to be hagun, he has to have proper midos. You see, because dafka, this type of Talmud Chacham, you should, quote, eat from him and learn from him. That, in other words, dafka, when the Talmud Chacham has the qualities of eitz, then mimenu soichal yisharifim, because this is what matters most, especially for most people, even Talmidei Chachamim, but especially your average person, because the main expression of the person, as we just said, is through the character traits of a person. This is the Rebbe, this idea that eitz represents the Adam, the small world, the each individual Adam, As the same as it is in each individual, it's also collectively by all Yidden as a collective, which is that we know that all Yidden descend from Avrohom, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, who they are representative of the general midos of Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, which is Ava, Yira, and Rachamim. These are, what is the connection? As you see over here emphasized, not so much with the intellect of the Avos, which certainly they had it, as it's expressed, each one, their expression of intellect and connection to Hashem, but rather specifically to the Midos, to the Ava, Yira, and Rachamim. And that's what we inherit for them, every single Yid, all times, in all places. What is the reason for this? Why does this the aspect that we inherit from the Avos, and this is how we're connected to them constantly in all times and all places? You see, because the idea of inheritance is that there is an inner connection from the inner aspect of the soul of the Moirish, the person who's giving it, the person from whom it's coming, to the Yoirish, to the one who is inheriting it. And therefore here, if the connection of the inheritance is coming from the inner part of the soul, what did we say before? What really expresses the most inner part of the soul? Specifically, Dafka, the character traits of the person, the midos, and that's why there's always a constant connection to the midos in the sense of our connection to the Avos as a collective, all Yidden being connected to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So the Rebbe concludes with a practical directive, a hira from all of this. As the makar, the root of the chayis, of the life energy of every single Jew, is obviously from the Torah, as we say every night. This is our life. This is from where we get our life energy. Most Yidden, however, are not in the group of Yidden who are Yoshvei Oyel, who are those who study Torah, and that's their only endeavor, day in, day night, or day and night, and day in, day out. Not at all. Most Yidden, however, quote, go out to the world. See the comparison, like a tree. They go out to the world. Their inyan is to go out there and to be mavara, to elevate the world. They're not in the oil HaTorah. They're not necessarily restricted just to learning Torah all day. And the idea of it, the lesson of it is that while you're out in the world, while a Yid goes out in that phase of life when you're working, you're supporting a family, you're generating an income, you're out there in the world, it should be noticeable, it should be distinguishable on the person, that this person is a person who is not only someone who once learned Torah and was once connected to Torah in the past, that's their source, that's their root, but rather it should be clear and obvious when you look at the person, that this person is a person who is currently, in real time, connected to Torah, right here, right now. And now on the other hand, those who are in the Yoshvei Oil, those who are all the time in the study halls of Torah, they too need to understand that they have to be connected to their eitz aspect, to their plant aspect, to their midos. Why? Because if they don't work on refining the midos, when they do go out to the world, God forbid, they won't be ready for the challenge because they only have their connection intellectually. They have not tapped in to the pnimius of their nefesh, to their inner soul.